second. So here we go, recording and officially start. So thank you, Tijana. Great to see you. Thank you for joining this webinar. We announced it as an opportunity to talk about trends shaping this year. It's no longer 2025 next year, it's already this year. I don't know how everybody is sitting with that idea, but that's reality probably. So that's in short why we are gathered here today to talk a little bit about trends shaping HR in this year, basically. Once again, welcome everybody, and special thanks to Tijana, who is our guest panelist on this topic. In the beginning, maybe a little bit of an intro for Tijana. I will start with a personal intro, and I will let Tijana do the official parts, if Tijana, you agree. So the personal part would be, Tijana is really one of the rare people, I would say internationally speaking, to follow all the trends, all the kind of ideas that are going on, to have had some really interesting and rare experience leading HR systems internationally. So I would dare say there aren't many people like Tijana in the HR world internationally. So it's really like a privilege to know you. It's even greater privilege to drink coffee with you whenever you're in Belgrade. So thank you for that. And I'm leaving you now a little bit of a journey of your career that I'm sure some of our participants would appreciate to know about you.
Oh, thank you for these kind words. I mean, I have to say I feel a bit embarrassed, when people talk about me in these terms. So, hi everyone, I'm Tijana, and I currently work for a company called Refurbed, which is headquartered in Vienna, but we are a remote first company. So basically, we are kind of all over the place with our employees. So I lead the people team there. That said, I actually started my career more in the corporate world. So I kind of jumped from, big brands like, Coca-Cola to, Qatar Airways. I lived internationally. And then I jumped into this startup and scale up world, which honestly stole my heart, if I may say like that, which means that, I really love like dynamic environment that actually applies, new technologies and new trends in the world of work. Unlike sometimes, honestly, I have to say lazy corporates don't, and they're like late to some trends. You will see me plenty talking very honestly and transparently. So I'm really sorry if I'm too blunt sometimes. So yeah, that's kind of my career in a nutshell. The rest you can really check on LinkedIn. And personally, I really love what I do. I think HR is really full of opportunities if you really want to see them. There is this side of transactional HR. If you want to do that, that's like any other administration. That's super boring. But then there is this like really new world of work. HR, which I believe I do, and yeah, I find a lot of energy in that. So yeah, thank you.
You just confirmed how I introduced you, so no need to blush, really. Okay, I don't know. I haven't really thought of a like straight lineup of the questions. I knew that just talking with you, some inspiration would come on each side. So maybe something around it's like end of January. What's this moment for you? How has the year started for you so far? And what are you sensing around? In some joke chatting with you, I said that Josh Bernstein had his webinar prediction 2025, and we were like one day after that. But he introduced this concept of super worker, and so I'm sure that AI is all over the place. But what's your kind of personal hunch and feeling at this moment, end of January? What's in your mind?
What's on my mind? Honestly, it is really AI. I know many people. I mean, I myself, I'm still in reflection. Like, is it just like a hype, right? Is it this? Is it that? Then recently we saw as well how OpenAI was copied by DeepSeek, right? And the Chinese, and how they improved the speed of all this technology, right? So there is a lot going on in the world on the technology side, which I really believe changes changes everything, right? I personally saw some changes already last year within my own team that made me rethink the structure of my team and actually the roles and the roles design. So I believe that is, still there. Actually, it was there, if I think about it, even a year ago, 2 years ago. The how to say, the problem I see is if you are on this side of catching up with it or you're leading at the front with it. I kind of try really for my organization to lead with AI at the front, right? There is many pressures, obviously, by employees and respectively, the business and leaders, like, yeah, but is this really real? Can it really help us? And then, you have a lot of these people who are sending you these links, like how it didn't work. And just like everything else in life, right? There's these, like, really big leaps into the future. And then obviously not everything is as promised, but surely not everything is really going to waste, right? So my key theme is actually really AI and human collaboration. And I'm saying that just because Jelena has a course on this topic. I really see it. And I'm saying this really honestly. And honestly, while I'm a bit afraid of it, right? What does it mean for the world of work? What does it mean for jobs? What does it mean for, people's skills? At the same time, I think it brings a lot of excitement. The only thing it really means is that, we really need to stay ahead individually, right? Like we really need to up our game. So that said, if I look at the organizational topics that are really on my mind, right, is due to AI and, different, systems and technologies that are, by the way, they were there. So now, for example, people are like, yeah, but I need to know how to use AI. Actually, this is not even true, because AI is so well integrated already in some software that, like, I think this will be this invisible technology. Just like at one point you started, like, typing instead of a typewriter, you started typing on a computer, and then you started using emails instead of letters, right? It's still typing. It's just doing much more and faster things for you. So org design will be a big question. And when I say org design, I really recommend everyone to really go deeper into, really understanding. Like, I think we sometimes, especially in high speed and high growth organizations, we sometimes, like, yeah, we need to hire for this role, right? Yeah, but what is a role? What does this person do day to day? What exactly are these tasks, right? If this task is something that happens daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, right? Do you really need this person on board all the time, right? Can this be automated? If it's an administrative task, can it actually be automated? So I would really recommend everyone who, as I said, wants to stay ahead to really actually go into job analysis. I know it sounds super boring and it sounds like, 1992 has kicked in again, but honestly, job analysis is the thing. And then trying to understand, skills from the jobs, and how those can be transferred is, I think, something that is on top of my mind. And there are other things, obviously.
Yes. So in a way, like a revival of classic organizational psychology with job designs, job analysis, and so all the super exciting things. This is, of course, irony coming out of me. I know that you're always, like, very well informed. So maybe before I ask you some of the questions around, I don't know, what you see in the future around, like, future in this year taking place in a different form, differently, like changes all over the place around you. That's something that's on my mind at the moment. One question before that is, what do you read at the moment? Where are you reading some interesting things? What maybe apps are you using? What, I don't know, whatever. What are your sources of inspiration and also information and so on? I know that this may be useful to some of our participants, and I'm always interested to learn that from you, to be honest.
Yes, great. So honestly, I am kind of, I still think and really believe if you follow the right people on LinkedIn, you can get a lot done through there, honestly, and it's all for free. And I can actually jump on a few names after in the chat as well to tell you who I follow as well. I think that would be useful. And some people that I really consider thought leaders who are also very, I would say, bold to open some topics that might be a bit uncomfortable, right? Then I would say a lot is there from really prominent software providers. So for example, we recently switched to HiBob as our HRIS, which I was really, and this is by all means not a commercial. I'm not receiving any commission for this, but I was really impressed both how this tool is designed from a UX perspective to how easily you can configure this tool to actually serve your organizational needs and your processes, right? And how intuitive it is also both for HR that actually needs to design it by the way we use our processes, right? Not just like these old fashioned systems like success factors, and this is a negative commercial. I'm losing money on this one, but that say, oh, this is how your onboarding should look like, and then you need to follow this process. Well, sorry, this is like not how my onboarding looks like. I mean, if it looked like that, I would be out of my job already. So in that sense, really seeing this modern software that actually then also, if you follow them on LinkedIn or use them, they actually have their own communities of practice. They have their communities, they invite you for, certain events, and they are actually on the forefront of, what is going on in HR. Another tool, I'm actually not using it in my current organization, but it's constantly fascinating me. It's Slack, right? Slack is used in many technology organizations, and I was in awe how Slack can serve as a major integrator and a front end of all your experience and systems, because it's so integratable with anything you use in your organization that, and as an employee, you actually maybe only need to use Slack, right? And you have your chat there, you have your approvals. If somebody sends you, oh, I want to book this flight or a hotel, right? You can approve it there. You can approve vacation. You can design all sorts of workflows in this tool. So I am honestly really, how to say, fascinated by all the apps and technology out there in the world of work. And I think that really changes the way we work.
I thought you would be like sharing all these kinds of some maybe new looks at the old tools like Slack. I think is already some sort of a mainstream, I think, now in 2025, but integrating it, creating workflows in Slack, that's, I think, still not mainstream. And I recall over one of the coffees recently that you were mentioning HiBob, if that's the name. So yes, this is not a commercial, honestly.
Yeah. But maybe it should be, right?
Yeah, maybe these YouTubers, they make a commercial out of everything.
Honestly.
Who knows?
Well, new sources of revenue, so I'm all for it.
Exactly. So it's great that you're sharing these things. And if I may ask you after the webinar or somewhere later on in the day, just like some sort of a wrap up of things, links and so on, I'm sure that many would find this useful. Me first, among the first. Now the question may be around, I don't know, your intuitions, and I believe that you're a very intuitive person, knowing you. Don't ask me how I know this. What are your intuitions around this year? Maybe one question like back, intuitions around global economics, and I know that you can talk very competently about that too. So like some sort of, where is the world going, like in 2025, economically speaking, and then maybe locate it within our more narrow topic of HR, if you may.
Yes. Honestly, I mean, it's a world of disruption. Only seeing just what happened now, with China and then, US market and everything. I think it's just, how to say, it's a proof that, there is some sort of, and I don't really want to sound like some, theory of conspiracy or whatever, but, there is a lot of actually, disruption, and there is a lot of some kind of conflict and, fight between different sides of the world, which is now a technological fight. It's not something that necessarily causes a war on the land, right? But it's really interesting for me, as I said, reading a few days ago only, when they launched DeepSeek, when they talked about nuclear fusion being like they kind of like kicked the record previously of 6 minutes in China, like all these new technologies, and then how this announcement came actually after for example, Trump assumed his presidency, right? Which means they were waiting for that, right? And then how that disturbed the market, which fell by I don't know how many trillion. So I think that only shows how disruptive this world will be. I can also see from this scale up and startup side, talking also from my colleagues, that we're all so cautious in terms of financially putting resources into things, right? So there will be more and more caution. Everybody will think twice. So should I hire or not, right? People say, oh, markets have reopened, but yet we're still not seeing some crazy hiring as we saw 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even like 3 years ago, right? So I would say the world will be on the cautious side when it comes to spending money, right? That will definitely affect the talent market. I see great stagnation, for example, in salaries in tech and product, for example, in like generally scale up and startup world. Why is that? Because salaries were growing at a massive rate of like surely like 10% year on year, and then now you see stagnation, which also tells you, okay, the demand is going down for jobs, right? So I think, on the employee side, I would ask myself, and that's what I do, at least, I would ask myself, like, how can I upskill myself? How can I, expose myself to things that are coming? And on the employer side, I would definitely take also this kind of critical eye on my current organization. How are people actually performing? How are these jobs designed? And when I say job design, I don't mean just, making them more efficient. Efficiency is one aspect of things, right? It's also about quality, right? And I think there are massive opportunities to use technology to make jobs more meaningful. And nobody talks about that, right? Everybody talks about, oh yeah, now jobs will be lost. Jobs will transfer to something else. If probably all of you are, unfortunately ordering food online, just like me sometimes, right? You saw how this disrupted the market in terms of, for example, right? You need a lot of delivery people. You need a lot of customer service, right? Because all of these services are now digital. So I think, what used to be, I don't know, telemarketing, right? Now that's customer service agent, right? So in that sense, I don't foresee things will be lost, but people will need to reskill, upskill, cross skill, like all sorts of things. And I think all it helps there is just to keep your mind open, and to not be, stubborn on things that, you don't like, because who likes that? Who likes change? But more be like really open and selfishly think as well, what can you do to stay ahead?
Perfect. And while you were talking, I recall that, I don't know, since 2015 or something, almost 10 years ago, we were so much talking each year, some sort of phrases like the world is accelerating, the pace of change is even great, like 10 years. Is this year different? Listening to you, a person could say, well, wow, this is like a disruption to super speed that we were talking about for a decade. Is this something new or more of the same? What do you think?
I think it's the same. I mean, I don't see. I just see that there will be my worry, and this is my intuition. I have no scientific reference for this. I personally sometimes feel challenged cognitively, and from a mental health perspective as well, to kind of keep up, right, with everything, right? It's so disturbing to think that the speed of things is such a humongous, like speed that at one point you're really like, oh, how will I make this, right? Like how will I how will I get to these 15 calls that I have in my calendar, and will I be actually be able to be focused on that? Then the speed and automation of things make you actually make demands of you to make decisions and critically think, because now if I write a policy with a simple chat GPT and say, oh, put me a travel policy with this and that elements, right? I still need to actually use much more brain power to critically think and assess. And on the other hand, the management perspective is, yeah, but now the AI can do it. Like, I just want you to read it quickly and comment on it, right? But to comment and suggest something, you really need to deeply think. So I would say, for me, what I also foresee is actually less work, right? So no more, again, focus on hours of work, but really focus on impact and how much can you actually get done if you really think deeply critically, right? If you use your highest cognitive levels of cognitive powers that we have at the moment, right? So that's something that kind of worries me, because I think that requires a lot of focus, that requires a lot of mindfulness even at work. If I think about like how I use my time, how I focus, that requires that I have time to think and not be in 15 different calls and then messages and all that. So I think the atmosphere and the environment at work will also need to change in order to adapt to these new demands, cognitive demands that you have of your people in the organization, because it's just becoming more and more demanding, I would say.
When you say that you feel like a little bit worried about how to catch up, it sounds scary, because I know how super fast you are. You're all over the place. I don't know, international, in different countries, different cities, like on WhatsApp, like Tiana in London, next day Tiana in Belgrade, Athens, Budapest, who knows where, Vienna, and so on. So I know how much you're accustomed to speed. So when you say it has, I think, at least for me, a different kind of I don't know, meaning than when somebody else says, I don't know how to catch up. You already tapped into that, but let me just maybe dive a little bit deeper into that topic together with you. And that is, what do you foresee as essential skills for the workforce in this year? You already said cognitive skills, and that triggered me, but with the way you were talking about it, to add their metacognition also, which is like monitoring how you operate. Like focus would probably go to metacognition, organizing yourself would probably go to metacognition, planning, evaluation. In terms of communicating with AI, metacognition is the critical kind of part where you monitor the output of AI and yourself, compare, and so on. So what's on your top skills list for this year?
Yes. I mean, I don't even know how would I call these lists, right? It's more like, synthesizing, analyzing, right? Even if you think about, like, for example, before it used to be like, oh, data literacy, right? And then everybody imagined that we all need to be, Excel pros, yeah, we could, right? But it's not about that only, right? It's about like, seeing this data and then kind of like data, maybe like seeing even insights, but then making sure that you actually connect the dots between these insights. And honestly, I don't even know how to call this skill, right? It's almost like, if I think about it really, really critically, right? I think like, wow, how much experience do you need to have to sometimes assess an insight, right? And how much, you can like be data informed, but you can't be really fully data led, right? So how much experience do you have? How much exposure to different situations? Maybe the situation is the same, but it was a different context, and how that can help you, assess the situation in this particular time. Then I would say more on the honestly more on the attitude side. I don't even know how I would, if that kind of counts as a skill, right? But I would definitely say, attitude and almost like personality, like openness to experiences, openness to new things, right? Is going to be key. Curiosity, right? I also see in myself, I'm always giving this example, how at one point, out of this like laziness, because I'm overusing Google Maps, right? Because I'm used to it, I was actually picking up my cousin in some port, and I see a cruiser that I know she's on, but Google Maps is telling me keep on driving, right? And I'm driving and I'm missing this cruiser. I'm driving for another 10 minutes, but Google Maps says I should continue driving. So I would say, also being cautious on, for example, that's why I'm returning to this topic of mental health and whatever. Actually understanding how your brain works is also super important. A bit of neuroscience or whatever we know about it and whatever is really true. Saying like, what, actually, to be successful, maybe I need to, completely get off social media for 5 days, right? Maybe I need to detox myself from this or that, right? So I would say, like, understanding yourself and what works for you and how you best work, how you can open your mind, how you can be curious, for me will be the and how you can, for example, stay calm when you, just like I described, you feel overwhelmed or you feel there are too many things to do, how can you actually put yourself in some sort of a state that, like, you can refocus and do things one by one. So I wouldn't say it's like some particular skills. I would say it's more on this, like, mindset and behavior side that I expect all of us to have to adapt.
You were mentioning experience here while sharing, and there is already some research that says that people who are more experienced interact with AI better than inexperienced people in the domain, in a certain domain. We are
Yes.
all experienced and inexperienced in certain domains, definitely.
Yes.
But in the domain of expertise, on a certain expertise, more of experience means more productive AI collaboration, which is somewhat maybe not so intuitive, because we would just say, well, younger generation would deal better with technology and so on, like some sort of prejudice, of course. So you're already putting experience there in that kind of game. I listened closely to what you were sharing. And there is also some concern already, I think, somewhere in the late 2024 around what will happen to generations entering the marketplace with AI. Would there be enough opportunities and so on? What are your hunches around that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I also have to say not a good one, right? I mean, if I'm being really transparent, I am concerned about, like, new people entering the market, and with this fact that you said as well, that experienced people who then have input, right? Then they can interact better with an agent or whatever, right? I think young people will really need to be like, if companies will need people, that's on the other hand correct, right? So we will always need people for something. I think the jobs are not going anywhere. It's more going to be like, what are these jobs going to be at the very beginning, right? And I think companies, in order to get these people to the jobs, will really need to approach this onboarding and training and graduate programs with a lot of actually like education, a lot of skill building, a lot of, like, it's not going to be like, oh yeah, you just come and I know, for example, how it is in my organization. We are a remote first organization. Just by that fact that you're not able to observe maybe your senior colleagues or whatever, that already changes the game. So you really need to be super intentional about creating opportunities for people to gain those skills, be exposed to something, right? So you really need to think about, like, even if I were younger now entering the market, I would really think about, like, how do I attach myself to somebody more experienced? How do I find a mentor? How do I go to one company, get an internship there, and then go to another, right? Just to experience these different things, right? Because we will all need to build our own experiences. Nobody likely will have time to take us by the hand and say, hey, this is how you do this. Like, that would be great, but I think expecting that is how to say, a broken already, a broken hope.
Thank you for sharing that. Confirming basically some of the hunches and some of the data that we already have around these topics. The next thing that you were mentioning is personality kicking in again, like an important kind of, probably not skill, we cannot call personality skill, but it's like curiosity you were mentioning, openness to experience and so on. What are your predictions for the next year? How do we build that in people? You know that we're from Coaching Center, and I can say, well, coaching is for that. But what are your
Yes.
kind of hunches? Will that be scarce? Will that be like plenty of curiosity, open-mindedness? What will be priorities for organizations to invest when it comes to learning and developing? You were mentioning many times upskilling and reskilling. So like a huge bunch of questions in one question. What's the
Yes.
kind of your hunch around upskilling agenda, globally speaking, if that's something that's
Yes.
interesting for you?
Yes, it is. For me, for example, somebody said from an L&D world, somebody I also follow, I forgot who it was, like, for example, e-learning is dead. Just called it out. It's like, I mean, please don't do e-learning, please. Like, these like slides that you just, this is like dead, right? I think people will really need this. Like, I see how we design learning inside our organization. I think what people really appreciate, actually, if you think about all the learning methods we have, right? And I think we're never using all the instructional methods at hand to actually teach a certain, subject or a skill or an attitude, right? We always resort to, oh yeah, let's have a discussion and then we will know. This can't be just another discussion, right? So, for example, I found really useful to kind of have this more like debates, right? Which let's say, you say, you create a situation and you say like, hey, let's now debate, some maybe like ethical situation, like, this happened, right? And then you say one group needs to fight for pro this, right? One group needs to fight against this, right? And I would say this, debate is actually like quite an old method, even in philosophy, right? So in that sense, I would say going back to maybe some initial kind of like, logic, philosophy, understanding, all of these aspects that really help you critically think about topics, right? And then, I know it sounds like, I know they were talking about this in the AI context as well. Like, what would Aristotle say on this, right? What would Kant say on this, right? And then really develop this very divergent way of thinking in terms of like, there are different perspectives to everything, right? And I think if we really get creative, this can be a super interesting process, both for our learners and then super interesting, on the receiving end, the organizations who will actually do something more effective, right? I also see in leadership development a lot of things, for example, which I really always never liked, because I used to do a lot of leadership development, myself to people and whole training and whatever. We thought, oh, let's do authentic leadership. I mean, what does that even mean, right? It's like, let's just go back to basic. Give me the situation. This happened, right? What would you do about it, right? So really use this like a real situation coaching, right? Exposing people to, for example, I know it sounds again very simplistic, right? But for example, we stopped doing role plays in or skilling, right? Because somehow role plays were like, oh yeah, but that's kind of, we don't want to expose people. Well, guess what? You need to expose them. Sorry. Like, demos, for example, demoing a conversation between two people, how something happens, is extremely powerful as a technique. Nobody uses that. I personally haven't seen many vendors, for example, use that. So I would say a lot of these very simple things that I know were working back in the days, were no longer in use because, everybody thought that like, technology will solve this. No, technology doesn't. Technology is, how to say, it's a channel. It's maybe like additional thing, but it's not gonna solve for bad instructional design and, bad reskilling or cross-skilling initiative.
I really like the things that you're sharing, and what comes across while listening to you is like, we have this kind of concept. It's called metacognitive laziness nowadays in psychology. It's really like almost coined recently with interaction in interaction with AI. Like when people just get an output from AI and take it, as you did with Google Maps,
Yes.
without AI, and just take it without critical thinking. We call it like metacognitive laziness. And e-learning, we can also expand the metaphor there. Also, it's to some extent supports laziness on the user side, like just like consume without necessarily critically engaging. And what I'm hearing from you is like, we need to set up L&D methods that actually reinforce critical engagement, maybe also metacognitive engagement, and all sorts of engagement that are, as you're saying, basic human kind of, you may say, values, skills, and so on, rather than maybe just go with some habits of L&D departments like e-learning or coaching or whatever you call it, but don't follow the habits, rather think about the basic things that improve. Is that kind of the summary of what you were sharing previously?
Absolutely. And I would say really the key to that will actually be human interaction, right? Humans will still learn, like, yes, agents can support this, but then you kind of want to check it. Like I've noticed that everybody, talks about, Gen Z, and, nobody wants to learn. Everybody is like, like this or like that. I haven't experienced that, for example. I think, people give you exactly how much you give them, right? And I experience the opposite, for example, in terms of, like, if people see that you're ready to give and share, and you really care about, their development, they will give it to you back. They will not be lazy. You can even tell them, read this book, and they will read it, right? Like, even though they would watch a video. So I really think it's about also understanding, human motivation. Managers will obviously be key. Now, managers as well need to understand that they're no longer just people managers. They're also, like, that is a high skill for sure. Everybody needs to develop that, myself included. But then they need to be technology managers. They need to be vendor managers. They need to be services and products managers, right? And I will just give a quick example of that. If you buy a piece of software, and you're managing this software, first, modern software is made on a premise that you as a user should actually manage this software. There is no more IT department that manages your software. Like, that's for sure. And I wouldn't allow IT department to manage my software. I would be like, stay away. But then when you manage it, you actually understand, oh, I actually need to, I need to really see how did they develop this product, because I need to make this product work for me, because obviously software development continues, right? And you need to make this product better for yourself. So you need to talk to the product manager there, or your customer success manager, and say, like, sorry, this doesn't work for me. This button here doesn't work for me. But to understand that, how to do that, you actually need to understand a bit of product design. You need to understand UX. You need to understand what works, right? So I would say, expanding the skills, like having an interest in technology. I see many people still denying some, like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I mean, I also don't want to do it, but I realize I have to take an interest in that, right? And doesn't mean like, oh, now I need to be on Snapchat and 15 different, like, you need to show interest. Like, you need to understand what's going on there. You might not use it, but you need to understand what's going there. And I know it's exhausting because something comes up constantly, but I think that's the only way to stay ahead.
Like some sort of cross-functional mentality that we need to develop, but not like we were talking about silos for, again, a decade or so. This is not only the silos kind of topic, but rather everybody needs to be, like, included in technology, in services, products, vendors, everything that you were mentioning.
Yes.
So something to add to maybe the wish list for the next year. Maybe one last question. I could continue like this with you, I know, for hours, and I look forward to your arrival to Belgrade to really do that in person. This is like something that I wanted to ask you on, apart from not preparing, but I wanted to ask you this. Imagine, are you imagining?
You can see my eyes going.
It's January next year, 2026. And we're having again this webinar conversation, call it what you want. What do you expect, like, to reflect on as if it happened in the previous year, in 2025? What would be your kind of expectations, and what do you think we will be talking about this time next year? Like in this time next year, we will be millionaires, something like that.
Yeah. I would say, honestly, the theme, because if I think about last year, right, like my still biggest obstacle sometimes in organization is actually resistance to change, right? Resistance and fear of what's coming, right? And fear of adapting, right? So I would say I would probably come here, talk about pretty much the same stuff, and then still be frustrated that some stuff is not there yet. But that's why I'm saying it's about, I think, this like small steps, that push this next, step, right? And as we get more into this, like, more people learn about it, more people get exposed to some technology and whatever, I think we will be like, closer to there. But I still see that we are blockers of the change. And I'm not judging if this change is good or bad, because, sometimes people are, yeah, you would like everybody to be a robot. I mean, no, I love my humans. I love having coffee with Yelena, but, definitely more than, this virtual conversation. But I think we must acknowledge changes here. And I still see a lot of resistance, which I think prevents us from this change eating us up, instead of us leading this change. And if we take a really proactive approach to some of these things, what we should do, what we could do, like how do we, not like technology eating us up, but kind of like, oh, if we think this is like something, how do I use you, not how do you use me? I think we would be in a much better position to prevent these negative consequences of technology, instead of constantly being afraid of them, but then doing nothing to actually prevent them.
So some sort of wished for position this time next year would be, we found ways to tackle resistance. We found ways to motivate people to go with the change, to use change for the good, to be part of it, and so on. Do you see, like, and this is promising the last question, do you see some new methods, like methods of instructional design, methods of L&D emerging in interaction with AI? Like not really us designing AI to do or partner with us in the existing methods. Do you see soon, like 1 year ahead, new methods emerging?
In all honesty, not that soon in the future. I think also sometimes, right, we get disappointed by technology. We expect a lot, right? But then it kind of slaps us on the face and like, oh, you can't do that, right? So I actually don't expect, like, I think there is a certain, just like with nuclear fusion as well, like there is a certain kind of like threshold, and then it takes a lot of time to beat that previous record, right? So there is certainly, like, now the big leap has been made, right? Now I think it's what we make out of it, but I don't expect some crazy acceleration. I just expect some, good ideas of like, oh, where could I apply this, right? But it's all going to be the same. It's just like the application might change here and there. And that's why I'm saying, like, people are sometimes too afraid of that, like, oh, everything is changing, but it's not. Everything is actually still the same. It's just like, if you really see it, it's not that changed. You just need to learn maybe the new ways how to unlock things, right? So I would say I don't expect some, major. I just do expect disruption in more like macroeconomic sense that will then, almost like outside in, disturb the companies, make companies think about, faster performance, right? And do that. So that's why I'm always saying, like, if I can recommend one thing to people as people, right? We're all some employees. We all need to, earn our salaries. It's like really to try to think a bit ahead, not be in this seat of like, oh, company will train me on AI. No, company will not train you on AI. Like, you need to train yourself. And there is really today no excuse not to do so. So that would be my my thought.
Perfect. So like global macros taking over and technology being just like part of it. That's something that I'm reading between your kind of between the lines. Like more impactful global macro economy changes and everything. Well, that's like we can always look at different angles. Like it can also be something that drives innovation, and we've observed in the recent kind of DeepSeek and everything that you were mentioning, innovation coming out of competition between the countries, which is sometimes good. I hope this conversation that was imaginary, like Tijana and me talking in 2026 January, would come really much sooner. So I hope I don't have to wait for a year to talk to you again, Tijana, about the meaning of life, universe, and everything else. Thank you so much for this conversation, and really looking forward to catch up live in Belgrade. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you everybody for joining us on this webinar. See you.
Thank you.